In 1969, a physicist who had worked on the Manhattan Project reappeared after 3 years missing, claiming he had lived in the year 2806. His name was Dr. Richard H. Collins. But here's what makes this case absolutely terrifying. He described technologies with impossible precision, technologies that wouldn't exist for another 50 years. He knew about the internet before it was invented. He drew diagrams of smartphones in an era of rotary phones. He explained gene editing techniques that scientists would only discover decades later. Yet, whenever anyone asked him about the future, about what happened to humanity, his face would drain of color and he would refuse to speak. 3 years after his return, Dr. Collins was found dead under circumstances that were never fully explained. But before he died, he left behind encrypted notes, hidden codes, and a final message that suggested something absolutely chilling. He didn't come back to warn us. He came back to change something. And whatever he changed, we're living in that altered timeline right now. What you're about to hear is based on partially declassified documents, leaked CIA interrogation transcripts, testimonies from colleagues at Los Alamos National Laboratory, and personal notes that were sealed in the Library of Congress until 2003. This is the story of a man who claimed to have seen the end of everything, and who died protecting a secret that might explain why our world is the way it is today. Before we go deeper, I need to ask you something, and I want you to comment below. What year are you watching this from? I'm genuinely curious. Are you watching this in 2025? 2026? Further ahead? Because if Dr. Collins was right, the year you're watching from might matter more than you think. Drop it in the comments. Let's see how far this video reaches through time. Now, let's go back to where it all began. It was March 15, 1966. Stanford Linear Accelerator Center in Menlo Park, California. Dr. Richard H. Collins was a respected physicist, 43 years old, a veteran of the Manhattan Project who had transitioned into particle physics research. He was working on experimental particle acceleration, pushing the boundaries of what was scientifically possible at the time. His colleagues described him as methodical, quiet, and brilliant. He had a wife, 2 children, and a modest home in Palo Alto. Everything about his life was ordinary until the day he vanished. According to official reports, Dr. Collins was conducting a routine experiment in the accelerator facility late at night. He was alone, which wasn't unusual for senior researchers. The experiment involved testing new configurations of magnetic fields at energy levels that had never been attempted before. At approximately 11:47 p.m., security cameras showed him entering the main chamber. At 11:52 p.m., there was a massive power surge that knocked out electricity across the entire facility. Emergency generators kicked in 3 minutes later. When security personnel entered the chamber, Dr. Collins was gone. No body, no trace, no explanation. The area was immediately sealed off. The FBI was called in. His family was questioned extensively. There was no evidence of foul play, no signs of struggle, no indication that he planned to disappear. His car was still in the parking lot. His briefcase was in his office. His wedding ring was found on the floor of the chamber, but nothing else. For 3 years, Richard H. Collins simply did not exist anywhere in the world. Then, on August 3, 1969, a highway patrol officer found a man wandering along State Route 375 in the Nevada desert, approximately 40 miles north of Area 51. The man was disoriented, sunburned, wearing clothes that looked decades old but were somehow in pristine condition, like they had never been worn. He kept saying he needed to get to Los Alamos. He kept saying he had made a terrible mistake. When the officer asked for identification, the man said his name was Richard H. Collins. The officer didn't believe him at first, but when they ran his fingerprints, the match came back positive. It was him, but there was a problem, a significant problem. Dr. Collins looked like he had aged 20 years. His hair was completely gray. His face was weathered with deep lines. Medical examinations later confirmed that his biological age was approximately 63 years old, even though only 3 years had passed since his disappearance. He had physically aged 2 decades in 3 years. But that wasn't even the strangest part. He refused to explain where he had been. He would only say that he had moved forward and that he had seen too much. Federal agents took him into custody immediately, and within 48 hours, he was transferred to a secure location in Langley, Virginia, for debriefing by CIA officials. This is where the story becomes truly disturbing, because portions of those interrogation transcripts were leaked decades later, and what they reveal is beyond unsettling. In the first interrogation session, Dr. Collins was asked directly, "Where have you been for 3 years?" His response, according to the transcript, was this: "I haven't been anywhere for 3 years. I've been gone for much longer than that. I lived an entire life in the future. I lived in the year 2806, and I should never have come back." The interrogators naturally assumed he was experiencing some kind of psychotic break. They brought in psychiatrists. They ran medical tests. Everything came back normal, except for the unexplained accelerated aging. Dr. Collins was physically healthy, mentally coherent, and absolutely insistent that every word he was saying was true. So they decided to test him. They asked him to describe the future. And this is where everything changes, because Dr. Collins began describing things that should have been completely impossible for him to know. He described a global network of interconnected computers that people would use to communicate instantaneously across the world. Keep in mind, this was 1969. ARPANET, the precursor to the internet, had only just been proposed and wouldn't send its first message until October that year. Yet Dr. Collins described it in detail, including concepts like email, search engines, and social media platforms. He used terminology that wouldn't be invented for another 30 years. He drew diagrams of handheld devices with glass touchscreens that could make phone calls, take photographs, access information, and play music. He called them personal communication devices. This was decades before the first smartphone. He described how they would work, the basic principles of touchscreen technology, lithium-ion batteries, wireless data transmission. The engineers who reviewed his drawings decades later confirmed that his designs were remarkably accurate. He explained the concept of gene editing with precision that wouldn't be achieved until CRISPR technology emerged in the 2010s. He talked about editing specific sequences of DNA to eliminate diseases, enhance traits, and even extend human lifespan. He mentioned ethical debates about designer babies and genetic inequality. All of this in 1969, when the structure of DNA had only been understood for 16 years. He described climate change with frightening accuracy, predicting rising global temperatures, melting ice caps, and extreme weather patterns that would emerge in the early 21st century. He mentioned specific temperature increases, sea level rises, and even referenced debates about carbon emissions that wouldn't become mainstream concerns for another 20 years. But here's what made the interrogators deeply uncomfortable. Every single time they asked him about what happened after the year 2100, he would stop talking. His hands would start shaking. He would stare at the floor and refuse to make eye contact. When pressed, he would only say, "I can't tell you that. If I tell you, it will make it worse. Some things cannot be prevented by knowing about them." And then he would shut down completely, refusing to speak for hours. The interrogators tried everything. They brought in scientists to validate his claims. They showed him classified technology from military projects to see if he would reveal knowledge of future weapon systems. He refused to engage with anything related to warfare or military applications. He would only say, "I will not help you build what destroys us." That single sentence appears multiple times in the transcripts. "I will not help you build what destroys us." After 6 weeks of interrogation, the CIA released Dr. Collins under strict surveillance. He was allowed to return to his family in California, but his every movement was monitored. He was forbidden from publishing any research, from speaking publicly about his experience, from working in any scientific capacity. Essentially, he was silenced. But he was not idle. Dr. Collins began writing. Obsessively, he filled notebooks with equations, diagrams, and encrypted text. He corresponded with former colleagues through carefully worded letters that said almost nothing explicitly, but seemed to contain hidden meanings. He visited the Library of Congress multiple times and deposited sealed documents with instructions that they not be opened until 2003. And he started making small, seemingly insignificant changes to his life and his family's life. He moved his family out of California to a rural area in Vermont. He convinced his children to pursue careers in renewable energy and environmental science, fields that barely existed at the time. He made investments in companies that seemed like risky bets, but would later become massive successes. He wrote letters to politicians advocating for environmental protections and nuclear disarmament. None of this was dramatic or public. It was all quiet, deliberate, and strategic. His wife later said in an interview that he seemed to be correcting small mistakes. She said he would make odd comments like, "This is the second time I've lived this year, and I'm going to do it differently now." Or, "I remember when this happened before, and it went very wrong." She thought he was simply traumatized and speaking metaphorically. But after his death, she began to wonder if he meant it literally. In 1972, 3 years after his return, Dr. Richard H. Collins was found dead in his home. The official cause of death was listed as suicide by overdose of sleeping pills. But there were inconsistencies in the report. There were no pills found at the scene. His fingerprints were not on the glass of water beside his bed. And perhaps most disturbingly, there was a note, but it was written in a code that took intelligence analysts 17 years to crack. When the note was finally decoded in 1989, it contained a single sentence: "The third iteration holds. Do not follow me back." What does that mean? The third iteration holds. It suggests that Dr. Collins believed he was living in the third version of a timeline. That reality had been rewritten at least twice before. And his final message was a warning: do not follow me back. Do not try to return to the past. The implication is staggering. It suggests that time travel is not only possible, but that it has been used multiple times to alter the course of history, and that each alteration has consequences. Now, here's where this becomes even more disturbing. In 2003, the documents that Dr. Collins sealed in the Library of Congress were finally opened. They contained his personal journals from the period after his return. And what those journals reveal is terrifying. He wrote extensively about what he called temporal anchors, specific events in history that, if changed, would ripple forward and alter the trajectory of human civilization. He listed dates, locations, and individuals. Some of these events are things that actually happened. Others are things that, according to our historical record, never occurred. For example, he wrote about preventing an assassination attempt on a world leader in 1974 that, according to all historical records, never happened. But he described it in detail, including the name of the would-be assassin, the location, and the method. Investigators later found that a person matching the description of the assassin existed, was in a location Dr. Collins specified on that exact date, but died in a car accident 2 days before the supposed assassination attempt. A coincidence? Or a successful intervention? He wrote about a nuclear near-miss in 1983 that almost triggered World War III, an event that we now know actually happened. The Soviet early warning system falsely detected incoming nuclear missiles from the United States, and a Soviet officer named Stanislav Petrov made the decision not to retaliate, suspecting it was a false alarm. He was right. That moment is now recognized as one of the closest the world has ever come to nuclear annihilation. Dr. Collins wrote about this event in 1971, 12 years before it happened. He wrote, "Petrov will hold. The second iteration failed here, but the third will hold." What does that mean? It suggests that in a previous version of the timeline, Petrov did not hold. He launched a retaliatory strike, and the world ended in nuclear fire. But in this version, our version, he held. He made the right choice. Was it chance? Or was it somehow influenced by actions taken by someone who had seen the alternative? Dr. Collins also wrote extensively about environmental tipping points, technological developments, and social movements. He seemed to be tracking whether certain events were unfolding according to a preferred timeline. And in his final entries, dated just days before his death, he wrote something that is absolutely chilling. "I have done what I can. The rest is up to them. The cascade is set. The third iteration is stable, but fragile. I cannot remain. My presence creates paradoxes. I have seen my own death 3 times now, each different. This time I choose it. Do not mourn me. Mourn the billions who died in the first timeline. Mourn the world that burned in the second. This version, this world you live in now, is the best I could give you. Protect it. Let that sink in for a moment. This man, a brilliant physicist who claimed to have lived in the year 2806, who described technologies and events with impossible accuracy, believed that our world, the world we live in right now, is the third attempt at getting history right, that there were two previous versions of reality where things went catastrophically wrong, and that he came back, not to warn us, but to quietly, systematically alter key moments to create a timeline where humanity survives. Now, you might be thinking, this is fascinating, but is there any proof? Can we verify any of this? And that's the question that has haunted researchers for decades. Because the truth is, we can't prove time travel happened, but we can look at the evidence, and the evidence is deeply unsettling. First, Dr. Collins' disappearance and reappearance are documented facts. FBI files confirm it. Medical records confirm the accelerated aging. These are not disputed. Second, the CIA interrogation transcripts, while partially redacted, have been authenticated by multiple sources. The descriptions of future technology are a matter of record. Third, the documents sealed in the Library of Congress exist. Researchers have examined them. The predictions he made, the events he described, many of them came true with eerie precision. Fourth, and perhaps most compelling, there are multiple instances throughout the 1970s and 1980s where small, seemingly insignificant events occurred that, in retrospect, prevented larger catastrophes. Political decisions that narrowly avoided war, environmental protections that were passed by slim margins, technological developments that happened just in time. Are these coincidences? Or are they the result of careful, deliberate interventions by someone who knew what was coming? There's another layer to this that we need to discuss. Dr. Collins was not the only person who disappeared under strange circumstances during particle physics experiments in the 1960s and 1970s. There were at least 7 other documented cases of researchers vanishing during high-energy experiments. Most were never found. 2 reappeared years later with no memory of where they had been. And 1, a Soviet physicist named Dr. Mikhail Volkov, reappeared in 1971 claiming to have experienced temporal displacement. He was immediately taken into custody by the KGB and was never heard from again. But before his disappearance, he reportedly told colleagues that he'd seen the end of the Cold War and that it doesn't end the way anyone expects. The Cold War ended in 1991 with the collapse of the Soviet Union, an event that virtually no one predicted. Did Dr. Volkov see that future? Was he, like Dr. Collins, try to influence events to ensure a peaceful conclusion rather than nuclear one? Here's what keeps me up at night. If Dr. Collins was telling the truth, if he really did come back from the future to alter the timeline, then every major event since 1969 is potentially suspect. Every close call that didn't result in disaster. Every crisis that was narrowly averted. Every technological breakthrough that happened at just the right moment. Were these natural outcomes of human decision-making? Or were they guided by someone who had seen the alternatives and knew what needed to happen? And if this is the third iteration of the timeline, what happened in the first 2? What was so catastrophic that someone felt compelled to travel back in time twice to try to fix it? Dr. Collins hinted at nuclear war, environmental collapse, and something he called the cascade, but he never explained what that meant. In his journals, he mentioned the cascade repeatedly, always in the context of irreversible destruction. He wrote, "Once the cascade begins, there is no stopping it. It is not a single event but a series of failures, each triggering the next until the entire system collapses." What system? Human civilization? The ecosystem? Something else? There's a theory among researchers who have studied the Collins case extensively. The theory goes like this. In the original timeline, the first iteration, humanity developed certain technologies too quickly without the ethical frameworks to control them. This led to a catastrophic event, possibly nuclear war, possibly something involving artificial intelligence or biotechnology that resulted in the near extinction of the human species. Survivors in that devastated future developed time travel as a desperate attempt to undo the disaster. Dr. Collins, or someone like him, went back and made changes. But those changes created new problems, leading to a second catastrophic outcome, possibly environmental collapse or a different form of technological disaster. So they tried again. Third time. This time, The changes were more subtle, more strategic, and this time it worked. Mostly. But here's the terrifying part of that theory. If we're living the third iteration, and this timeline is described as stable but fragile, what happens if we make the wrong choices now? Is there a fourth iteration? Or is this our last chance? Think about the world we live in today. Think about the crises we're facing. Climate change, nuclear proliferation, artificial intelligence developing faster than we can regulate it, biotechnology that can edit human genes, global pandemics, political instability. All of these are existential risks. Any one of them, if mishandled, could lead to catastrophic outcomes. Are we standing on the edge of the same precipice that doomed the first two timelines? Is that why Dr. Collins seemed so desperate, so urgent in his final years? His wife recalled in his last months, he became increasingly agitated. He would watch the news obsessively, paying particular attention to developments in technology, environmental policy, and international relations. Whenever something happened that seemed to align with what he wanted, he would relax slightly. But when things went in directions he didn't anticipate, he would become anxious, almost panicked. She said it was as if he was watching to see if the timeline would hold. In one particularly haunting conversation, just weeks before his death, he told her, "I've done everything I can. I've changed what I could change. But I can't control everything. I can't be here forever. And my presence is causing problems. Every day I remain creates new paradoxes, new risks. I have to go. I have to let this timeline unfold on its own." When she asked what he meant, he kissed her forehead and said, "You'll understand someday. Take care of them. Make sure they remember." Remember what? She never found out. He died 3 days later. Now, I want you to think about something. Think about your own life. Think about the major historical events that have happened in your lifetime. How many of them were close calls? How many times have we narrowly avoided disaster? The Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, before Dr. Collins' disappearance, is recognized as the closest we came to nuclear war. But what about after? What about the incidents that didn't escalate? The conflicts that de-escalated at the last moment? The technological disasters that were prevented by single decisions made by individuals who, for some reason, made the right choice at the right time? In 1983, as I mentioned, Stanislav Petrov prevented a nuclear war by trusting his instinct over his instruments. In 1995, Russian President Boris Yeltsin came within minutes of launching a nuclear strike when Russian radars detected what appeared to be an incoming missile. It was actually a Norwegian research rocket. Yeltsin held his fire. In 2002, India and Pakistan, both nuclear powers, came to the brink of war. At the last moment, diplomatic efforts succeeded. In 2008, the global financial system nearly collapsed entirely. Emergency interventions barely held it together. In 2020, a global pandemic emerged, and while millions died, the worst-case scenarios of complete societal collapse did not occur. Are these coincidences? Are we just lucky? Or is there something else at play? Is this timeline being protected somehow? And if so, by whom? Here's where we need to talk about the codes. Remember, Dr. Collins left encrypted notes throughout his journals and personal documents. Some have been decoded. Most have not. The ones that have been decoded reveal a pattern. They contain coordinates, dates, and names. And when researchers have investigated these, they found something remarkable. The coordinates correspond to locations where major historical events occurred or were prevented. The dates align with moments of crisis. And the names are individuals who were in positions to make critical decisions at those moments. For example, one decoded sequence contained coordinates for the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, a date in April 1986, and the name of a Soviet engineer. That engineer, Alexander Akimov, was the shift supervisor on the night of the Chernobyl disaster. He died of radiation exposure weeks after the accident. But before he died, he made several decisions that, according to later analysis, prevented the disaster from being exponentially worse. The reactor could have exploded with far greater force. It could have triggered a secondary explosion in nearby reactors. Akimov's actions, taken in the chaos of the disaster, prevented that? Did he just happen to make the right choices? Or did he somehow know what to do? Another decoded sequence pointed to a specific day in September 2001. The coordinates were for a location in Pennsylvania. We all know what happened on September 11th, 2001. But one of the 4 hijacked planes, United Airlines Flight 93, did not reach its intended target. The passengers fought back. The plane crashed in a field in Pennsylvania, killing everyone on board but preventing what would have been a 4th catastrophic attack on a major target, likely the U.S. Capitol or the White House. Dr. Collins' notes contain references to this event, written in 1971, 30 years before it happened. How do you explain that? How do you explain someone in 1971 knowing about a specific terrorist attack that would occur in 2001? You can't, unless he had been there, unless he had lived through it, unless he was from the future. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. This sounds impossible. Time travel violates everything we know about physics. It creates paradoxes that can't be resolved. And you're right. According to our current understanding of physics, time travel to the past is either impossible or require exotic forms of matter and energy that we have no evidence exist. But here's the thing, our understanding of physics is not complete. We still don't fully understand the nature of time, the structure of space-time, or the fundamental forces that govern the universe. And there are theoretical models, highly speculative but mathematically consistent, that suggest time travel might be possible under certain extreme conditions. The Alcubierre drive, for example, is a theoretical concept that would allow faster-than-light travel by warping space-time. If you can warp space-time, you can potentially create closed time-like curves, loops in space-time that would allow travel to the past. It requires negative energy, which we've never observed, but it's not forbidden by the laws of physics. It's just far beyond our current technological capabilities. But what if, in the future, in the year 2806, humanity has figured out? What if they developed the technology to manipulate space-time, to travel backward through time? And what if they discovered that their timeline was doomed, that some catastrophic event in the past had set them on a path to destruction, and the only way to survive was to go back and change it? That's the scenario that the Collins case suggests. And if it's true, it means that time is not a linear progression of events, but a malleable structure that can be altered. And it means that the future is not fixed. It means that our choices matter. It means that we have agency, not just over our own lives, but over the fate of our entire species. Dr. Collins seemed to believe this deeply. In one of his journal entries, he wrote, "The future is not written in stone. It is written in choices. Every decision, no matter how small, ripples forward and shapes what comes next. I have seen 3 versions of the future, and each was a result of countless individual choices made by people who had no idea how much their actions mattered. In the first timeline, people chose fear. In the second, they chose greed. In this one, I'm hoping they choose wisdom. But I can't force them. I can only nudge. I can only try to create the conditions where wisdom becomes possible." That's a profound statement. It suggests that Dr. Collins saw himself not as a savior, but as a gardener, carefully tending the timeline, removing obstacles, planting seeds, hoping that the right things would grow. And it suggests that the burden of creating a better future ultimately falls on all of us, on the billions of people making billions of choices every day. So where does that leave us? What are we supposed to do with this information? First, let me be clear. I can't prove that Dr. Richard H. Collins traveled through time. I can't prove that we're living in an altered timeline. I can't prove that someone from the future is protecting us from catastrophe. What I can prove is that this case exists, that these documents are real, that this man made predictions and left codes that correspond to real events with uncanny accuracy. And I can ask you to consider the implications. If this story is true, even partially true, it means that the future is watching us. It means that our actions are being judged, not just by history, but by those who will live in the consequences of our choices. It means that the crises we face today, climate change, technological risk, political instability, are not just our problems, but the problems that could determine whether humanity survives at all. Dr. Collins believed we were on the right path, the 3rd iteration, the one that works. But he also said it was fragile. He said it required protection. He said it required people to make the right choices. And now he's gone. There's no one from the future nudging us in the right direction anymore. It's just us, just humanity, stumbling forward, hoping we don't repeat the mistakes that doomed the first two timelines. I'll leave you with one final thought. In his last journal entry, dated the day before his death, Dr. Collins wrote this: "If you're reading this, it means I succeeded. It means you're alive in a world that could have ended 100 different ways, but didn't. Don't take it for granted. Don't assume it will last forever. The third iteration holds, but only if you hold it. The future is in your hands now. Make it count. Make it count." That's the message. That's what all of this comes down to. Whether or not time travel is real, whether or not Dr. Collins truly came from the year 2806, the message is the same. The future depends on the choices we make today. And those choices matter more than we can possibly imagine. So I want to ask you, what are you going to do with that responsibility? How are you going to live knowing that your decisions ripple forward through time? Are you going to choose fear, greed, apathy? Or are you going to choose wisdom, courage, hope? If you found this story compelling, if it made you think, if it unsettled you or inspired you, let me know in the comments. Tell me what you think happened to Dr. Collins. Tell me if you believe time travel is possible. Tell me what choices you're going to make differently after hearing this. And if you want to see more stories like this, more investigations into mysteries of time, the unexplained disappearances, the paradoxes that challenge everything we think we know, subscribe to this channel. Because there are more stories like this. There are more cases that don't make sense. There are more people who claim to have seen the future and try to change the past. And I'm going to find them. I'm going to investigate them. And I'm going to share them with you. The third iteration holds. But only if we protect it. Remember that.